When the husband learns the truth about his wife's betrayal, he plunges into a whirlwind of emotions and disappointments, embarking on a dangerous investigation to unravel the mystery that threatens their marriage. But what if the mysterious enemy is willing to do anything to keep their secrets hidden? Have you ever been obsessed with anything? I was, and it didn't do me any good. I was obsessed with exposing my wife as soon as possible, but I didn't notice the most obvious things that lay on the surface. It seems to me if I had noticed all this earlier, I wouldn't have been worried about such serious consequences. After another grueling workday, I returned home hoping for a peaceful evening in the company of my wife, Emily. The streets were awash with evening light as I drove through the last few blocks, anticipating a warm smile and candlelit dinner, a small yet significant ritual we occasionally indulged in, reminiscent of our early dates. Stepping into the house, I caught whiffs of Emily's favorite scent mingling with the aroma of freshly cooked dinner. This evening seemed to hold nothing out of the ordinary. We sat down at the table, exchanged news of the day, sharing minor joys and disappointments. Her voice sounded as melodious as ever, her gaze filled with warmth and care. As the evening progressed, we moved to the living room to enjoy a cup of tea and watch a new series which had become our little obsession. Emotions flickered on the screen, but I noticed Emily's gaze drifting, her thoughts wandering elsewhere. A vague unease crept over me, but I brushed it off, thinking it might just be fatigue from the day's work. That night, light conversation and laughter were filled with the familiar coziness of our home. I cherished these moments of tranquility and closeness, unaware that soon our mundane existence would be called into question. At that moment, I simply rejoiced in the peaceful evening spent together, oblivious to how soon everything would change. As the evening turned into night, our conversation became more intimate and profound. Emily suddenly grew silent, and in her eyes, I saw a shade of seriousness that rarely appeared without a significant reason. It became clear to me that she wanted to share something important that she had been holding onto for a long time. My initial thought was to support her, as in our relationship we always aimed to be open and honest with each other. "Michael," she began, and I felt my heart skip a beat in anticipation. "I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about it for a long time and have come to the conclusion that I can't keep hiding it anymore." She said this, and I understood that the conversation was going to be very serious, as such words often precede something unpleasant. "Yes, dear, I'm listening attentively," I said. "Just don't think it's about you," she began after a brief pause. "I want to explore myself more, but because of our marriage, I can't do that." "You understand?" "I don't understand." "What do you mean?" I asked genuinely, not comprehending what she was implying. "I want something new, you understand," she attempted to hint. "Do you want to spice up our sex life?" I asked. "No, I want to try something new with another man," she said directly, and I was stunned, not knowing how to react to such a revelation. It was unexpected for me, especially considering we had been together for 6 years. My emotions quickly shifted. I became more serious and asked, with the same expression on my face, "You want to have sex with another man?" I asked this very harshly. I saw Emily beginning to hesitate, her eyes darting from side to side. "No," she blurted out, "I was joking, honey. It was just a prank." I completely didn't get her joke, and I really couldn't understand what had just happened, so I decided to ask a clarifying question. "Honestly, do you have someone else besides me?" "No, where would you get such an idea?" she asked. "Then what was the point of this whole conversation?" I asked, my nerves on edge. I absolutely didn't understand what to do and say. It all seemed strange to me. Emily got up from the couch and headed to the bathroom, leaving me alone. A couple of minutes later, Emily appeared in front of me in a robe. She approached me and whispered directly into my ear, "Darling, I'm not wearing any panties." At that moment, I understood what was going on. Emily deliberately wanted to upset me to later engage in passionate intimacy. At least that's what I thought, so I relaxed, lifted her up, and we did it first on the kitchen table, then finished our evening in the bedroom. After that, we didn't return to this strange conversation. After our conversation that evening, a couple of weeks passed. With each passing day, my anxiety only intensified. I began to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior that previously seemed insignificant to me. Now, every call she hurried to take in another room, every tardiness from work became reasons for suspicion for me. I used to trust my wife, but now I felt like she was hiding something. I decided to talk to her about it, hoping that an honest conversation would help dispel my doubts or at the very least understand what was really going on. Emily, I began one evening as we sat in the living room, I feel like something has changed between us. You seem distracted. Is there something you would like to tell me? She looked at me with bewilderment, then replied with a slight smile, Michael, I'm just tired from work. Don't worry so much, everything is fine. But my doubts didn't disappear. I began to pay attention to details, unexpected delays after work, new habits that seemed strange to me, such as her taking more frequent showers when she returned home late or going to the bathroom with her phone, which she didn't do before. All of this made me contemplate starting to monitor her movements. I didn't see the point in hiring a private detective because I thought I could handle it myself. I began to note the times she left and returned home, checked her social media messages, sometimes even tried subtly to find out who she had been with during the day or evening. There was nothing suspicious in her messages, she didn't give me any reason to worry. But strangely, this only fueled more anxiety as that conversation with her echoed in my mind when she mentioned wanting something new. My doubts and uncertainty continued to grow with each passing day, and I decided it was time to act more decisively, if only for my own peace of mind. I began to monitor her movements more closely. One day, when she said she was staying late at work, I decided to check her words, parking my car several blocks away from her office. I approached closer to see if she would come out accompanied by someone else. Standing in the shadows, I felt like a character from a cheap detective novel, but the trembling in my heart reminded me that this was my reality, not fiction. After about an hour of waiting, I saw Emily coming out alone. My relief was short-lived as a few minutes later, a yellow Chevrolet Camaro pulled up to her, and a man much older than both Emily and me stepped out. They embraced, and my heart stopped. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language spoke volumes. Emily was touching this man's hands, then they shared a passionate kiss. They laughed and got into the car. I remained standing in the darkness, trying to gather my thoughts, realizing that I had messed up by not capturing video or photo evidence. On the way home, I tried to figure out what to do next. Questions raced through my mind. Should I confront Emily now or gather more evidence? Can I trust her at all, and what does this mean for our future? I returned home, and about an hour and a half later, Emily returned, immediately heading for the shower. I realized it was pointless to talk to her right now as I had no evidence, so I installed a tracking app on her phone, justifying my actions with a desire to protect our future. In the first few days, I barely noticed any changes, but over time, I started receiving notifications that confirmed my worst fears. Emily was spending time in places she hadn't told me about, and it seemed like she was trying to hide these meetings from me. One day, after such a notification, I decided to follow her. My fears were confirmed when I saw her meeting with the same man. They seemed happy and relaxed together, which was a blow to me. I recorded their meeting on video, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and shattered hopes. On the way home, I pondered what to do with this evidence. On one hand, I wanted to confront Emily and demand explanations. On the other hand, I was afraid of destroying what was left of our relationship. I hired a private detective to gather more evidence while trying to maintain my usual lifestyle and not arouse suspicion from Emily. I didn't want to be a cuckold, so I planned to give Emily a truly cruel surprise. The private detective worked for 3 weeks, and after that, he provided me with all the information about my wife's meetings with this suspicious man, who turned out to be Randy Campbell, an influential individual with his own business unrelated to my wife's work. It became a mystery to me when and under what circumstances Emily met this man. I realized that decisive action was necessary. Thanks to the private detective, I found out that Emily stays with her lover every Saturday at a 4-star hotel, and they spend a minimum of 2 hours there. I also knew their room number. They had room 305, a luxury suite. So on Thursday, I asked my close friend, whom I explained the whole situation to go to the same hotel and book room 305 for a day, paying him for it. Since each room in this hotel had its own key card, my friend accidentally lost it the next day, Friday, and paid a small fine for it, which of course I compensated him for. As a result, on Friday, I had the key card to room 305, the very room where my wife usually spent time with her lover. I slept poorly on Friday night, but surprisingly, the next day, I felt alert and fresh. Emily left for work as usual, but from early morning, a private detective whom I had asked to work that day was watching her, since I had taken the day off in advance. Closer to lunchtime, I went to the hotel. I planned to book room 304, but decided to inquire with the administrator about room 305 first. I was told that the room was booked for today, and I sincerely wanted to believe that my wife and her lover had reserved it. Towards evening, I received a message from Emily, "Dear, I'll be late today, so don't wait for me." "No problem," I replied, and also called my private detective, who informed me that my wife had left the building and gotten into a taxi, apparently heading towards the hotel. I was surprised that she was alone, but at that moment, I had already decided to act, so I left my room and entered room 305. On the table, I placed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, as well as a magnificent bouquet of flowers on the bed, and sat waiting. My hands and legs were shaking from the impending meeting, but I understood that it was necessary. Emily arrived at the hotel around 40 minutes later. She was still alone. I asked the private detective to keep an eye out, and as soon as he saw Randy Campbell, to inform me immediately. I heard Emily approaching the door and activating her key card. The door clicked, and she entered inside, looking so beautiful and independent. "You know, I think I understand what you meant by studying yourself and why our marriage is getting in the way," I said, pausing. At that moment, Emily's phone slipped from her grasp. She clearly didn't expect to see me here. But I continued, "But I don't understand why you didn't tell me everything that was going on with you that night." Emily stood silently, seemingly paralyzed. She looked at me, and I could see her trembling. She was scared, which amused me even more. I approached her, picked up her phone, and put it in my pocket. "What are you doing here?" she blurted out. "Did you think you could cheat on me, and I wouldn't notice?" I asked. "No, darling, what are you saying?" she said, suddenly coming to life. She wanted to approach me, but I stepped back. "I suggest we discuss everything." "Sit down," I said, and she sat at the table. I opened a bottle of wine, and as I poured us a drink, I decided to inquire, "Can you tell me how many times you've had sex with Mr. Campbell here?" "I haven't had sex here," she quickly replied. But I silently sat on the opposite side and continued, "Did you enjoy having sex with him?" "Please stop," she said nervously. And at that moment, I took out my phone and turned on the audio sound, which captured Emily's moans and how she begged her lover not to stop. You tell me to stop, but you asked Mr. Campbell to continue," I said. "I don't understand what you want," she continued to resist, looking like a mouse trapped in a cage and not intending to give in. "I just can't understand. You came here alone, and soon your lover is supposed to arrive. If you came here alone and no one forced you, then it's your choice, isn't it?" I asked, and it was evident that Emily was struggling with the tension. "I cheated on you, but it doesn't mean anything. I'll stay with you," she said bluntly. "You'll stay with me? Why do you think we'll be together after this?" I asked. "Don't you love me?" she asked. "What does that have to do with anything?" "We're talking about something else entirely," I said, raising my voice. "If you love me, you'll forgive me," she said directly. I laughed right in front of her. It sounded so absurd that it was even funny. "You're arguing like a little child. We're adults, and I want to have a normal conversation with you. Understand where I went wrong, or maybe you have some issues lately. We've been talking less because you were caught up in your love affairs, and I was busy keeping an eye on you," I said. And then I got a notification on my phone, but I ignored it and continued, "You're resisting now, and it's unclear what you're hoping for. I want to save our marriage and help you primarily, but you're forcing me to resort to manipulation. I want to understand everything that happened and why you cheated on me." "I didn't cheat on you," she said loudly. "Are you mocking me?" But then I noticed Emily's eyes. They weren't usual. They were red and clearly not from tiredness. I realized she was in an altered state. She was under the influence of prohibited substances. "I understand you don't love me, so I'm leaving." At that moment, I realized it was serious, and my wife's strange behavior wasn't just because she cheated on me, but she was also involved in something forbidden. She quickly headed for the door to leave the room, and at that moment, I followed her and began to hold her back. I grabbed her hand, and she used her free hand to scratch my face. Then I grabbed her with both hands, and we fell onto the bed together. At that moment, I realized how much I had lost her and how much I didn't know. At that moment, Randy entered the room with a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. He saw me dominating Emily right on the bed, and I completely forgot that he was supposed to come. "Please help me." This man entered the room and started harassing me, Emily shouted, and I realized that at that moment, it was over for me. They would either kill me or severely injure me. I didn't recognize my wife who wanted to set me up. I saw Randy skillfully and quickly throw the wine bottle in my direction, but I managed to dodge it and fell off the bed. Randy was a big and athletic man, unlike me because I didn't go to the gym and didn't practice martial arts. But I knew one really cool move, although I never used it, so I thought today would be the right moment for it. "You've misunderstood everything. I'm her husband," I said to Randy, who was heading towards me, clearly not with friendly intentions. Randy stopped and looked at Emily. "Is that true?" he asked her. Emily was already in tears. At that moment, she looked at me and confidently said, "No." I was shocked by such a statement, and now I looked like a man who barged into a hotel room and harassed someone else's girlfriend. I would probably have killed myself. I realized that the situation had gotten out of control and action was needed immediately. Randy came charging at me again, and when he was within arm's reach, I applied that same technique. I hit him as hard as I could right in the groin, clearly catching him off guard. I saw him blush and grab his little buddy with both hands, and literally within a couple of seconds, he was lying on the floor motionless. At that moment, I realized I needed to get out of the hotel. Emily was crying, and when I tried to lead her out, she resisted. I'd had enough of this, so I had to shout at her, "If you don't come with me right now, I'll call the police, and we'll go for tests." As soon as she heard about giving samples, her expression quickly changed, and she obediently followed me out of the room. After the incident at the hotel, we went to the hospital first, where Emily had to give all her samples, and they found prohibited substances in her blood. So I had to leave her at the hospital, but before that, we talked. At that moment, she was lying under a drip and gradually coming to her senses. I began to ask her how she ended up in such a life, and it turned out that her lover, Randy, at every meeting, gave her something to try, but he himself didn't try anything. Emily got hooked on it. Emily told me that Randy is a shareholder in their company, and she met him a couple of months ago. He courted her for a long time, but she always refused until he let her try something new. After that, something clicked in Emily's head, and she wanted to meet Randy every time to find herself in that state again. He gave her prohibited substances, and in return, she had to sleep with him. Such a revelation horrified me, and frankly, I didn't believe her as she had already deceived me. Instead, I decided to wait a couple of days and came back to her at the hospital to have a proper talk. She looked better already, and I saw how her eyes changed. I couldn't believe how I hadn't noticed all the changes that had happened to her before. I tried to expose her and didn't notice obvious things. Her eyes, I thought she was just tired from work, her nervousness, irritability, all these were side effects of prohibited substances. All her inappropriate behavior in recent months is a result of all this. She got involved with a bad person who took advantage of her. It was terrible. I didn't know what to do in such a situation. After a couple of weeks, Emily repented and confessed that she did it on some animal instinct and didn't even realize the extent of her actions. She was still in the hospital undergoing rehabilitation. I wanted to file a police report against Randy to hold him accountable, but my lawyer said it was pointless. Do you think the police will believe more a drug-addicted girl without direct evidence or a successful and influential businessman? Argued the lawyer, and he was right. We had no evidence except for Emily and Randy's regular meetings, but that wouldn't play a role in court. The most I could do was accuse Emily of infidelity and divorce her, so I decided not to touch Randy, considering the fact that he didn't pursue me after the altercation at the hotel during which he got hit in his golden eggs. A month later, Emily went home. She was still undergoing rehabilitation because her addiction was strong, but the doctor said she could be at home now. Emily stopped working and spent whole days at home. I didn't know whether to divorce her or not. On the one hand, this person betrayed me, but on the other hand, she was sick and in a difficult situation. So I decided not to rush things and waited for the right moment. But in the end, everything only got worse. Emily started drinking alcohol every day. One addiction replaced another. I realized that I couldn't handle her, so I had to inform her parents about what happened, and literally the next day, her father came to our house. Seeing his daughter, or rather what used to resemble his daughter, Emily had lost a lot of weight due to treatment and practically didn't eat anything. Her father first yelled at her and then at me for not taking care of his daughter and exposing her to such danger. A month later, Emily and I divorced, and her father took her home, and I was left alone. I still blame myself for not noticing the most important thing. I wanted to catch my wife cheating and got fixated on gathering evidence rather than focusing on the most important thing. Maybe if I had been a little more stubborn that evening and had a frank conversation with her, none of this would have happened. My main thought is that it's important to pay attention not only to finding evidence, but also to communicating with your partner. An open and honest conversation could prevent many unpleasant situations. Additionally, it's important to remember that we're all only human and don't always see all aspects of a situation at once. The key is to learn from past experiences and move forward, striving to become the best version of ourselves. Story 2. I don't consider myself a cruel or vindictive person, but the situation that happened to me turned my outlook on life upside down. I resorted to manipulation so that the perpetrators of my misfortune would be punished. I loved my wife for her honesty and simplicity. We always had something to talk about. But everything changed as if at the click of a finger when I decided one evening to look into my laptop. How far can dreams take you? When I was little, my dreams seemed quite clear to me and undoubtedly achievable. I dreamed of the sky. I didn't just want to be closer to the clouds, I wanted to slice through them at speed, leaving behind only a trail from a jet engine. My father often joked that I started walking late because I always aspired to fly, not to take steps on the ground. This dream of flying wasn't just a child's fantasy, it became my compass in school. When we were asked about our future profession, my classmates talked about wanting to become doctors, teachers, firefighters. I, without hesitation, declared, I will become a pilot. My words elicited smiles and support, but I saw notes of doubt in the adults' eyes. It's difficult, it's dangerous, you will need to study a lot, these phrases I heard over and over again. But they didn't scare me, they only added to my resolve. I spent summer vacations working at an aerodrome, which transformed from a place of my childhood dreams into the reality of my teenage life. I helped in the hangars, watched the mechanics at work, and sometimes, by great luck, I was allowed to sit in the cockpit of an airplane when the pilots checked the systems before a flight. But, as it often happens, life rarely follows a straight and predictable path. My ambitions encountered an unforeseen obstacle that made me reconsider my entire future path. It all started on an ordinary day in flight school, which I entered after finishing high school. It was a time when my dream seemed so close that I could almost touch it with my hands. I was one of the best students, and my instructors saw in me not just enthusiasm, but a true talent for flying. That day was supposed to be one of my first solo flights. Everything happened as in a dream, the anticipation, the excitement, the last instructions from my mentor. I felt ready for this challenge, for this step towards my dream. But just a few minutes before takeoff, something happened that I could never have anticipated. During the pre-flight maneuvers on the ground, I miscalculated the distance and speed, leading to a minor but significant incident. The plane was damaged, and although I remained unharmed, the consequences of that moment became decisive for my further career. The following weeks were filled with doctor's visits, examinations, and ultimately, an unpleasant verdict. The injuries sustained from the accident disqualified me from obtaining a professional pilot's license. It was a blow I couldn't recover from for weeks. The adaptation period was difficult. I had to accept the fact that my path to the skies was forever closed. The decision came unexpectedly, but it seemed right. I turned my attention to law, a field that had always interested me but previously seemed nothing more than a distraction from my main goal. Law offered me a new challenge, a new arena for success, and most importantly, the opportunity to help others. While the dream of flying taught me to strive for the impossible, law taught me to appreciate order, logic, and justice. I realized that even if I couldn't touch the skies, I could leave my mark on the earth by helping those in trouble or facing injustice. My path to my dream was reimagined, and I found the strength to accept the new reality and move forward despite all obstacles, despite such a tragic fate. I did not lose heart and went to study law, and ultimately, I managed to get back on my feet. I finished my studies and started working at a small legal firm. During that period of my life, I met Cheryl. It happened one evening when I decided to grab a bite at a cafe after work, and that's where we met. Cheryl was amazing. She worked as an accountant in a small company. Her optimism, zest for life, and ease of communication immediately attracted me. We started dating, and our relationship developed rapidly. We both felt that this was it, the long-awaited feeling of true love that is talked about so much but experienced by few. After a year of dating, I proposed, and Cheryl said yes. Cheryl gave birth to 2 boys for us, but as in any story, there came a moment when our idyllic life was disrupted. Minor disagreements began, which in any other context would have seemed insignificant, but gradually they accumulated. We were both busy with work and raising children, which seemed to leave less and less time for us as a couple. I noticed that our conversations became more superficial, and the evenings we once spent discussing our dreams and plans became rare. Attempts to restore our closeness seemed like temporary solutions. I understood that something needed to change, but I didn't know where to start. My attempts to drown out anxiety with work only made the situation worse, leaving Cheryl feeling even more alone. Maybe we should see a family psychologist, I suggested to Cheryl. Do we have some problems in our relationship? Is something bothering you? She replied sharply. It's just that we're constantly having disagreements, and to be honest, it's starting to bother me. I tried to say as gently as possible, I'm fine, and I think we're fine. I don't see any reason to go to a psychologist, she answered. I didn't press Cheryl, assuming that she might be having her period. I didn't like the way she was responding to me, but on the other hand, I started to think that maybe I was making up problems in my head when in reality everything was fine. This continued for several more months until one evening I heard a notification on my laptop. It was an email from an unknown address. Opening it, I found words that were hard to believe. An anonymous sender claimed to have seen Cheryl with another man, and it wasn't a one-time thing. The words were accompanied by photos of my wife hugging an unknown man, unknown because his face wasn't visible in any of the photos. There were photos of them walking around the city, sitting in restaurants, and entering hotels. I wasn't foolish enough to believe any photos from the internet, so the next morning I went to work and called my friend Donald, who often helped me out. I explained the situation to him and asked him to follow where my wife would go after work today and if she was with a man to inform me immediately, and he agreed to help me. I saw no point in private detectives simply because it would take too long considering the fact that I already had evidence in the form of photos. I just wanted to make sure of it with the help of my friend. At 8 o'clock in the evening when I was finishing work and about to head home, Donald called me with important news. Dude, it looks like she's cheating on you. She left work early and took a taxi to the Bell Hotel where she met a man and spent about an hour with him in the room, he said. For me, this was unexpected news because at least I trusted my wife and believed the photos were false, but my friend confirmed my worst fears, so I understood that I needed to take some action. I thanked Donald and headed home where I met Cheryl, who acted as if nothing was amiss. This simultaneously angered and soothed me because I wanted to teach Cheryl a lesson, and she wasn't supposed to know that I was aware of anything. The next day, I received another email from an anonymous sender, this time with photos of a more intimate nature. The photos depicted an act of infidelity. My wife was lying on her back, legs spread, and this man was photographing everything from above. I didn't know who the sender was, but it seemed to be my wife's lover. But why was he sending these to me? I started to become truly paranoid, thinking that my wife was plotting against me or expecting some reaction from me, but I couldn't be sure. Since I had undeniable evidence, I wanted to file for divorce, but I wanted to protect myself and, if possible, take custody of our 2 children. That same evening, Cheryl approached me and said, "My parents have invited me to stay with them for the next week with our children." "What do you think?" she asked. "I would love to go, but I have work and I won't be able to," I said, and Cheryl stated that she would then go with the children, which meant she would not be home the following week, giving me a great opportunity to execute my plan. I wasn't sure yet what to do, but I was certain she was cheating on me, and apparently, her lover really wanted to expose her secret affair, though I couldn't understand why he would want to do that. But it no longer concerned me. Making a difficult decision, I started to act. I quit my job so that I had the time and energy to deal with all the related issues. While Cheryl was preparing for the trip to her parents and thought I was disappearing into work, I was busy with important matters. I found a woman named Tammy who closely resembled my wife except for her hair, but that was quickly fixed by a stylist acquaintance. Tammy worked at the same company as me. I knew her well, so she agreed to help me and act as my wife. In 3 days, we managed to make Tammy fake driver's licenses and a passport of my wife, and when Cheryl left for another city, we started to act. First, we went to the bank, and with Tammy's help, I withdrew all the money from our joint account and also blocked Cheryl's cards. The next day, Cheryl called me and asked me to go to the bank to find out what was wrong with her cards. I said I would definitely look into it, although I was already busy with entirely different matters. Officially, the house belonged to both Cheryl and me, but through legal maneuvers, Tammy and the house ended up entirely mine, a process that took 3 days, resulting in the house being fully mine with Cheryl having absolutely no claim to it. I wanted to sell the house, but decided to postpone this action as I wanted Cheryl to return to my house and leave the children there, and only after that would I kick her out. While I was in the house, I inspected Cheryl's belongings, and at some point, I became even more angered, hurt, and pained by her betrayal, so I started to destroy Cheryl's things, which I had given her during our marriage. I knew these items could never compensate for the lost years, invested feelings, or shattered dreams, yet their destruction was a symbolic act that allowed me to cope with the inner pain. It was my way of saying goodbye to the past and freeing myself from it to start anew. With every torn letter, every thrown-away photograph, I felt the shackles of resentment and betrayal falling away, giving me a chance at a new life. I began tearing her things apart and ended with the destruction of her gadgets, laptops, headphones, and everything else. I did not want her to use anything after our divorce. I had a lot of money because with Tammy's help, I had emptied all joint and her personal bank accounts, half of which I transferred into cryptocurrency, and the rest I scattered across my personal accounts. Also, in a burst of emotion, I made a significant purchase. The Dodge Challenger I had dreamed of since my youth was now parked at my house. This was not just the acquisition of a car, it was the acquisition of freedom, the ability to move forward, explore new horizons, and discover new paths with every drive in this car. I felt my self-confidence returning gradually, finding myself in this new world full of changes. Cheryl and I had the money to buy such a car, but she always told me it was a waste of money, that a car is not a luxury but a means of transportation. During that crazy week, I remembered all the times Cheryl had held me back when I wanted to buy something for myself. She always dissuaded me. But when she needed something, it was important. I think that's why I decided to destroy all her things. My knowledge in law greatly helped me. I was able to protect myself and commit numerous schemes that could have landed me in jail. But the only thing I wanted was not to be cuckolded, a desire that was stronger than anything else, so I didn't care about the legality of my actions. When everything was prepared, I just waited for Cheryl's return. When Cheryl returned home after a week away, she discovered that her world, so familiar and cozy, had collapsed. Police cars were parked near our house, and I saw her approaching the home, unaware that it was no longer hers. "Oh my God, James, what happened?" she asked. "You wouldn't believe it." "We were robbed this morning while I was at work," I said, fabricating the robbery to justify why half of Cheryl's belongings were gone and the other half destroyed. After the police left, Cheryl entered the house and couldn't believe her eyes. She also noticed my new car and started yelling at me. "James, are you completely out of your mind?" She began hurling accusations at me, but she had no idea what was coming next. I covered her mouth with my hand and asked her to listen to me. "Here's the thing, my dear," I pulled out a copy of photos where my wife was cheating on me. "I think you understand what these photos are. Lying and making excuses is pointless. I've already filed for divorce, accusing you of marital infidelity." Cheryl looked bewildered, clearly not expecting this turn of events. "But how?" "I don't understand," she said, reminding me of the first month of our relationship when she appeared innocent and kind. "Also, until the court's decision, you cannot stay in the house, as it legally no longer belongs to you, and the children will stay with me too," I said and handed her a paper with an official seal. She looked at it and began to cry, but I was indifferent to her tears. "You're to blame for this. When you decided to cheat, you should have understood the consequences of your actions. However, I can make a concession. If you tell me who your lover was and why you decided to cheat on me," I said, and all I heard from her at that moment was "go to hell." She turned around, got into the car with the children, and drove away. I wasn't worried because I knew the children would be returned to me in a day or two, but the one thing I didn't find out was who my wife had cheated on me with. A couple of days later, Cheryl came to me on her own. She had no money, not even for lawyers. She couldn't even take care of the children. She realized she had fallen into a trap. All her accounts were blocked. Our home was no longer hers. "I realized this was your doing." "What do you want?" she asked. Before answering, I asked for her phone. She wondered why. I asked her to just show me the screen. She showed it to me, and I saw a voice recorder app running on her phone. I took her phone, turned off the recording, deleted it, and continued the conversation. "I need you to voluntarily divorce me and not claim any of my personal property. Then I will return all your money," I said, knowing she had no other choice. "Do you promise I will get everything back?" she asked. "I promise," I said, having crossed my fingers on my left hand beforehand. I gave Cheryl some money for the time being, thereby convincing her that I had no intention of deceiving her, and she willingly believed me. The children stayed with me, so I was happy. As time went on until the trial, I took the children to my parents and focused on selling the house, as I was the sole owner, and my current wife officially had no claim to it whatsoever. My goal was to sell the house as soon as possible before the trial, and it was successfully achieved. Cheryl suspected nothing. I didn't even know where she lived or with whom, but by then I was indifferent to her and her lover, understanding she was likely living with her lover because she had nowhere else to go. Maybe if Cheryl had confessed everything to me and stated she wanted a divorce, I would have proceeded without much trouble, but instead, she made a cuckold out of me. I once lost my childhood dream, but I will never lose my honor and dignity. The divorce process turned out to be easier than I anticipated. Cheryl was without a lawyer, so she did everything on my terms. Our joint home was no more. She refused to claim my car, even though the Dodge Challenger was officially registered to my father, and Cheryl didn't even claim the children, acknowledging her mistake. After that, I realized it was all worth it because what good mother wouldn't fight for her children? Cheryl agreed to all my conditions and never tried to object. She assumed that after our divorce, she would receive $500,000, but the only thing she would end up getting was nothing. "Do you really want to end everything like this?" she asked, so submissive and even sweet that I thought about forgiving her at one point, but I understood that I could not. "Do you see any other outcome?" "My trust in you is shattered, and I suggest we simply part ways," I said, and she just nodded in response. "All right, and you will return the money right after the court." I was always amazed at how naively she believed that I would return her money, considering she had paid too little for what she had done. In the end, when the divorce was finalized, I felt not so much relief as exhaustion. After completing all the divorce formalities, I changed my number and moved far away to a new house, gradually starting to adapt to a new life. While the new house was being renovated, I decided it was too early to move the children, so I began looking for a new job, wanting to occupy myself as I was in a difficult emotional state following the divorce. That's how I ended up working in a small grocery store for the time being, and it was there I met Beverly, who was a bright spot in all this story. It was her store, which she had inherited from her parents, and eventually, we started dating. Just a month and a half after I began returning to normal life, my friend Donald suggested we meet at a bar for a drink. I wasn't planning to drink, but I wanted to meet since I hadn't seen him since the time I asked him to keep an eye on Cheryl, so it was a great opportunity. That evening, I arrived at the bar in my car, not wanting to drink, also because Beverly doesn't like the smell of alcohol. Entering the bar, I saw Donald sitting at our table. We greeted each other. He ordered a beer, and I ordered a non-alcoholic cocktail. Donald was acting strange, and within the first 10 minutes of our conversation, he had already become annoying, asking about things he shouldn't have been. He inquired about the money I promised Cheryl after our divorce, tried to find out where I was hiding the children, and how I managed to pull off the entire scheme against Cheryl with the house sale and canceling the accounts. I immediately understood that this conversation was not friendly. "What kind of interrogation is this, buddy, and how do you know all these details?" I asked. "It's just not right to deceive women, you know," he said. "I didn't deceive anyone. I took what was rightfully mine," I said. "You were supposed to just divorce her, not deprive her of everything," he said. "I simply returned her to the level she was at when we first met." "It's only fair," I said, and immediately realized something. "You mean I should have just gotten a divorce? What are you talking about? You go through such schemes, yet you can't figure out the basics." "I am that very anonymous sender," he said, and everything clicked in my head. "Are you saying you were my wife's lover?" I asked. "Bingo, dude, you finally got it." He paused briefly and continued. "You should have just divorced Cheryl, not ruined her life completely. We love each other and your marriage was the only obstacle. So, dude, if you want to stay healthy and avoid problems in the future, you need to return all the money and then some," he said, hitting me where it hurt most. I decided to take matters into my own hands. "And when do you want the money?" I asked. "Right now," he answered. "But I don't have anything on me right now," I said. "Then you'll be lying in the hospital until you pay back the entire debt." He spoke these words and raised his left hand. I saw those same guys from the corner start moving towards us. I quickly stood up from the table and ran to the exit, got into my car, and saw two big guys running towards me. I started the car quickly and drove away. I went to Beverly's and spent the evening in thought. I couldn't believe my close ones could do something like this. I was so grateful to myself for having protected myself during that period. The next day, I contacted one of my clients whom I had saved from prison a couple of years ago. I gave him Donald's address and asked him to visit him and explain that blackmail is wrong. The next day, I received a video where Donald, kneeling, was begging for my forgiveness and said he had no claims against me and demanded nothing. I also decided to compensate Cheryl, realizing she was going through a tough time. It was a small but symbolic amount. After dealing with my past, I decided to focus on my present. So, step by step, I moved forward, leaving the shadow of the past behind and looking towards the future. My meeting and relationship with Beverly became a symbol of a new chapter in my life, filled with hope and optimism. Together, we were able to create a unique union based on mutual understanding, support, and genuine care for each other. Her presence in my life reminded me that love is possible at any age and after any trials. With each day spent in the company of Beverly and my children, whom we eventually took to our new home, I became more aware that life after divorce is not the end of the road, but rather a new beginning. I also decided to return to my professional career as a lawyer, only this time I opened my own agency, renting a small space and hiring employees. Work became a source of new achievements and satisfaction. By taking the lead on several projects, I discovered in myself the ability to inspire and motivate my team, achieving remarkable results together. Success at work filled me with pride and confirmed that despite all the twists and turns of the past, I was capable of moving forward, reaching new heights, and making a positive contribution to the lives of those around me. In those moments, I realized that the life lessons I had learned over the past few years had become an integral part of my being. They taught me to appreciate every minute, find joy in the small things, and not be afraid to set big goals for myself. I understood that happiness is not a destination but a journey we choose every day, and that it is within our power to create a life filled with meaning, love, and satisfaction. A few months later, I met with Donald and Cheryl on neutral ground. They acknowledged their mistakes and asked for my forgiveness. They said they should have confessed everything to me right away, and I forgave them easily because I was happy. I allowed Cheryl to meet with the children. They asked for financial help as they were in a difficult financial situation, but I decided to refuse, believing that each person should solve their problems independently and bear the consequences of their actions. They silently understood me. Thus, step by step, I continued my path forward, grateful for every lesson life had taught me. I was ready for new challenges and adventures, knowing that wherever the road might take me, I would always find the strength to go on, maintaining faith in myself and in the bright future that lay ahead. This story emphasizes the complexity of moral dilemmas and psychological aspects of problem solving. It makes us ponder the boundaries between right and wrong, as well as what compromises we are willing to make in difficult situations.